For my second bonus article, I was going to talk about the article called The Blue Blood is Bad, Right? And it's talking about curriculum can be powerful when you structure it around the questions that students really care about. So the starting situation was a health teacher is lecturing about the circulatory system. And when you talk about the circulatory system, you usually draw red arteries and blue veins. And she always talked about that the red arteries are the ones that have the oxygen-rich blood, and the blue veins are the ones that are deficient in oxygen, and that's why they're coming back to the heart. She wrote all these different blood vessels on there, large and small, and she always talked about blue blood not being oxygenated enough. So there was a girl that raised her hand and said, "Is there something wrong with the blue blood?" And she just said, "No, it just needs more oxygen. It's on its way back to the lungs so that it can get that." And the teacher continued to lecture, and again, this little girl raised her hand and said, "So the blue blood is bad, right?" And she said, "It's not bad, it's just deoxygenated." She goes back to the lecture. So this person that was observing decided to go up and ask the little girl and said, "It sounds like you're really interested in why the blood turns blue." And she said, "Look at my arm. I have all of these blue veins running down here, and I have sickle cell anemia. So I want to know if that's bad blood." And so this observer was like, "Holy crap. She really wants to understand about her blood, and she's trying to make a connection, and her teacher is glossing over that." Obviously, not a great thing for that teacher. So for that student, it wasn't just about blue lines and red lines and how the arteries work. It was the circulatory system was not a standard. It was something that she really wanted to understand about her body. So she was trying to find that way to connect the school material with something that she cared about the most. So for this example, and again, it's a science one, but at the heart, we want to know as much about our human body as possible because we want to know what makes the body work and how am I going to be most efficient at keeping that body healthy and strong. So these are questions about survival. So we're not only just going to look about, oh yes, the circulatory has blood, has arteries, has veins, has your heart, but how do we keep those things in tip-top condition so we can survive and last a long time? So the questions aren't really what's driving our curriculum anymore. It's more of just a set standard of rules. So they want to change it so that the questions, really what the students want to learn is what's being taught. So of course, one of the things that we've been looking at is, in a typical high school, you go from one class to the other. You're crossing disciplines, but you're not really correlating that information between the disciplines like that. So they're looking at if the schools are going to organize their curriculum based on these existential questions, we can get more powerful connections and the students will tend to retain their learning on such key content. So there's been a couple of schools across the country that have tried to do this interdisciplinary approach, and one of them was a school in California that was looking at English, social studies, and a biology chemistry concept throughout moral questions. And their first moral question was, how can we respond to human suffering in ways that promote dignity? So they were looking on different things like the biology content, talking about cell replication and division, your immune system, and then the workings of viruses and pathogens, because that's kind of what human suffering part is about. But then they also, as they did their lab work, they kept the humanities in the back of their head, knowing that their aim was to link that science with the social ramifications of disease. So in social studies and English, they started to look at questions like, what's the socioeconomic impact of a particular disease, or does society have a responsibility to treat diseases? So while they were doing their lab research, they were also looking at the more humanities side of it and seeing how different questions that arose in their research could pose towards that side of their brain as well. One of the things that they did as their final project was they had a day-long seminar on different diseases, and they had other students come in, they had adult guests come in, and they also had different people with direct experience of that disease. So they were talking about science and society, and some of the comments were like, I thought more about diseases and their effect on the world than I ever had before. And also that they had said, and also that they had learned more about their disease and science and English and social studies in general than they would have in any other lecture. So this article also kind of outlines a 3-step process on how you could do this. So if you wanted to design your unit around a certain question, the first thing that you're going to look at is a question that addresses an essential element of the subject matter. And then your second step, is it provocative to a particular group of students, because that's going to be your hook and your tie-in. And it can't be addressed fully and immediately. It needs to be illuminated over time. So there needs to be some effort put in there. And also finding new information as they learn throughout this. And then, of course, the last final plan is putting it all together and having those case studies that provide a concrete subject matter throughout which you have those core ideas. So another one is just asking those moral questions, those tough questions that you've kind of shied away from, I guess, maybe because there's a hot button of discussion, but that's where a lot of the students get involved, because with those moral issues, they really tend to have an opinion of one way or the other. So one of those questions are, what are the implications of what I'm doing for my beliefs and my actions? So when they were talking about the bus boycott and how Rosa Parks decided that she was going to sit in the front and that wasn't a spot for her, think about a girl that may be a mix of European descent and Asian descent. Where am I going to sit? You've talked about whites versus African Americans. Where am I going to sit in that mix? Because I'm really not either of the two. Do I get to sit in the middle? Do I not get to ride the bus? So she wants to figure out, knowing her nationality, her background, she wants to figure out where she's going to fit in the puzzle. And that's a really strong point to be making, because that opens up a world of discussion, and then there's more learning. You're making those connections, because now you're thinking, where's Marika going to sit? Those kids are starting to ask themselves, so I'm given this piece of information now, and how does that fit into my life? How am I going to fit into this picture? So again, those two questions of blue blood is bad and where would I have sat are really profound, but they are going to be an interesting hook to get those kids very involved in their learning. I think it seems like in high school we squash that natural curiosity by the time they get up to us, and we're just focusing on, you don't need to know that, you need to know what's on the test, where we need to foster those questions and really leave classroom open to those types of discussions, because that's where those real connections are going to be made, and using those questions they can make sense of their own lives and see where they fit in. This video is sponsored by the letter C and the number 2.